Good morning and welcome to the Sustainable Farming Association's 31st Annual Conference. My name is Yvonne Baller and I'm the Treasurer of the SFA Board of Directors. This session is Meat Processing Initiatives and Challenges with Thom Petersen, Minnesota Department of Agriculture Commissioner. We'd like to thank the sponsor of this session, Lake Winds Food Co-op, a community-owned local grocery store with the highest standards around. Lake Winds has 3 store locations, over 300 employees, and a passion for local, sustainably grown food. We'd also like to remind you that one of our other winter events, the Midwest Soil Health Summit, is coming up on March 9th through 11th. We will be featuring Gabe Brown, Sarah Keogh, and a panel of soil health practitioners. You can learn more on our website, sfa-mn.org, where you can also register. Admission to the summit is free to SFA members. Remember to sign into your SFA account when you register to obtain your free admission. If you are not already a member, I encourage you to join SFA to support this important work and stay connected to this community. Again, look for the membership link on our website at sfa-mn.org. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator for this session, SFA's own Executive Director, Teresa Keaveney.
Good morning and thank you, Yvonne. I have the pleasure of introducing Commissioner Petersen. Before I begin, I did want to echo Yvonne's thanks to Lake Winds Cooperative and also to all of the sponsors and exhibitors of our 31st annual conference. This panel will have a sharp ending at 10. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll try to keep up with them. There won't be a lot of time for questions, but if necessary, we'll get back to you after the conference with answers. I'd also like to let you know that this will be available after the conference to all of our members and registrants, and we'll also make available a lot of the links. Well, I am so happy to have Commissioner Petersen, who is actually a member of our East Central chapter, and Yvonne is the delegate to the board from the East Central chapter. He is our Commissioner of Agriculture, appointed to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture by Governor Tim Walz in 2019. He's a longtime resident of Royalton Township near Pine City, where he lives on a horse farm. And before being appointed commissioner, he served as Director of Government Relations for Minnesota Farmers Union since 2002, working on behalf of MFU's farmer members in both Washington and DC. He has served on many boards and committees, including the University of Minnesota Extension Citizens Advisory Board, Farmers Legal Action Group, Citizens Utility Board, Minnesota Ag in the Classroom, Minnesota State Organic Task Force, Minnesota Rural Broadband Coalition, and the Minnesota Fair Plan. Commissioner Petersen and his wife Alana live in Pine City with their 2 sons. They show horses around the state and have competed in the Minnesota State Fair for over 25 years. And I know he is looking forward to a face-to-face state fair. Welcome, Commissioner Petersen, and we will get this screen share going.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for that invite, and Yvonne, good to see you. And you know, I'm really glad to join you this morning. I should start by saying just welcome everybody. I'm joining you here from Royalton Township in our cold farmhouse, and hope everybody's staying warm, and thank you everybody that has livestock. And I wonder who has the coldest temperature this morning. I see some of the people in northern Minnesota, like Hannah and others, probably have colder than I have this morning. So welcome everybody, and really glad to join you. As Teresa said, I am a member, and I have been for a while. I was able to listen in yesterday to the chapter updates, which I thought was really interesting during my lunch hour, and great to see all the work SFA is doing. So with that, we can go to the next slide, and I'll just jump right in. I'm going to talk kind of fast and try to get through some of this. You know, in agriculture and meat processing and everything, we have to think about COVID and how COVID affected us this past year. Throughout the pandemic, we've really, jumped right in. Really, if you think about what happened in March, before the big processing plants shut down or anything, as we went into kind of a lockdown there in late March and early April, there was an incredible demand all of a sudden on locally processed food, especially beef and meat. And we saw it with freezers being sold and people buying freezers. And, farmers that I buy from were sold out quickly. We realized that we had a big issue. So in COVID, we're going to talk about, there may be some good things that come out of that. It was really a big boost in those sales of local products. But we worked hard, to try to address issues we had with grocery stores, farmers markets, a lot of that. In grocery stores, one of the things that also provided an opening too was for some of our farmers to sell through Equal 2 plants into local grocery stores, which was really exciting connection that we made and able to continue to work on. We also, just during the COVID, we've had to, continue our day-to-day regulatory responsibilities that we have, including the food, meat, and dairy inspection. We've done tried to tweak things, but keep in mind, of our 500 employees, about 2.5% of them have contracted COVID, some on the job, some not on the job. And that it is a concern for us when they're out in the public and for me as commissioner. Next slide, please. I'd also say that early on in the, COVID, I wanted to touch on too, that we were, farmers were considered to be a critical sector. And so farmers were allowed to do this. We're also working on a 1B, and that announcements will be coming as soon as possible to where farmers and food workers fall into this. Some of the other things we did in COVID real quick, we created and distributed more than 50 COVID-19 guidance documents and everything from, really started with farmers markets, because they've just, as we got into that March and April, were they going to be open? Were they going to be closed? We figured that people wanted to do that. It was outside, it would probably be okay, but there was things they could do. So we created a guide working with the Farmers Market Association. We did one for wineries, U-Picks, all those type of things. Farms, we have 50 different guides, and there you can find them on our website. There's a COVID page. We also, if you ever have questions for the department, we have this email, MDA Responds, and it's really interesting, all the different questions we would get during the day about COVID. We don't get as many now, but how it interacts, but always feel free to do that or look at that email. We also hosted weekly conference calls to keep our stakeholders informed. When COVID started, we started with having calls 3 times a week with all of our different groups and companies. I always appreciate Teresa, I know, joined those calls and was very available to talk through ideas and suggestions. And so then we went to twice a week, once a week. Now we're down to once a month. Our farmers market, some of the examples of some of the assistance programs we did, I just wanted to touch on as we talked about farmers markets, because it also comes into local meat processing and distribution. We provided $13,000 to assist 51 farmers markets this summer, and that had to do a lot with, buying those extra tables, signage, hand washing, all those type of things. We also have a grant, I think it's still open, for winter farmers markets, and we did a smaller one to that. We're going to look and see if we're going to continue to do that into this next year. We're going to make a decision here in the next couple of weeks. We also did $13,000 to assist farms who are doing on-farm sales. So a lot of farms I see here too have maybe a store right at their farm now. And so that was another thing we were able to do. Next slide. There's some other aid I just wanted to mention. We do have a COVID loan that's open right now. It's a 0% interest rate on our portion of the loan, which is 45%. If you are looking for, unfortunately, need another loan, that's you can prove that you have been affected by COVID, you can access this money, and feel free to ask us more about that. We also did scholarships for farm business management, a loan guarantee for, grant for loan guarantees. And one other thing we did is we were working through this fall, we were able to receive $500,000 that we worked with MEDA and the LEDC to award grants to Minnesota local producers and regional markets with a priority given to BIPOC farmers. And that was really good. I think we over 50 some farmers got that, but also 50 some families that were struggling and worked for meat processing plants. So that was a really important use of CARES dollars that we did. And next slide, please. So getting just into the meat processing and what really happened this year, I think many of you are probably very familiar that we ended up in a really, so I talked about precarious position because we talked about early on in COVID, there was just a boom for local processing. You know, in fact, we knew that as I became commissioner, building out our local processing was one of my top priorities. In fact, Commissioner Bailey was just about to launch a series of listening sessions in February and April of last year when COVID hit on meat processing. But then COVID hit and there was a huge demand. But then what happened in April, Smithfield, the largest Midwest in Sioux Falls, went down, and they take 13 to 14,000 pigs per day from Minnesota. And they were down for a month. So you had these pigs that in that system are just in time backing up on farms. The JBS plant went down for almost a month. In Worthington the next week, that was another 10 to 15,000 hogs of Minnesota hogs a day. And we had this, you know, kind of catastrophe happening where we have this just in time hogs. So these hogs were over 300 pounds needing to go somewhere. And unfortunately, we had to depopulate because we couldn't flood those into the local system. We sent pigs all over the country. Some plants that were running maybe ran on Saturdays. The unfortunate thing too, or fortunate thing, depending on how you look at it, a lot of those pigs went into local markets. You probably saw on Facebook, people posting, these bigger farmers posting that I have 2,000 hogs, you can have them, you know, or you can have them for $5. You know, the kind of calls I would get during the day from those farmers that were in that position was very tough. You know, they would call me and say, what am I going to do with these pigs? You know, I'm going to bring them up to the forest and turn them loose. You know, I don't want to have to put them down. It was really, really difficult. But it showed the challenge and some of the weakness in our food system that we have to address and going forward and work on. So it really, we also saw shortages in the grocery stores, and that was a piece where I always felt like we had the meat in the state. We had to kind of move things around and address that and connect the dots. And that's one of the things we did with some of the smaller plants selling to our local grocery stores, which was a real success story and something we can build on. And keep in mind, sometimes the big companies really fight back against that because they might have exclusive contracts. So that was interesting. And I mentioned this last piece, especially on the freezers. Next slide, please. Well, some of the things that we did as quickly as possible as we saw this happening is we stood up an incident management team that we would meet every morning. And that had staff from the Board of Animal Health, MPCA, the USDA, and a lot of our great staff and people that we had really worked to address some of these issues. And we would meet and discuss these every morning. We had to order depopulation supplies from the National Veterinarian Stockpile. We had 2 executive orders. We established sites for composting pig and turkey carcasses. I talked a lot about pork, but we also at the same time probably were euthanizing hundreds of thousands of turkeys as well, as they had the same issue. We also had to develop a carcass delivery and scheduling system. And believe me, that was not an easy thing to do. Next slide, please. So that's kind of the backside on like a lot of like the bigger problems that we had. And I think that what we started to do too was try to, we assigned a couple of staff people, Jim Osley and Kelly Anderson too, to really help us look at what was the capacity at all of our custom, equal to, and USDA plants in the state. We tried to have them take calls. They did a great job. And a lot of times, you know, we surveyed plants to see who had space, who didn't have space. And that was really tough because pretty much nobody had space. So it really helped us. So try to think through connections as we were trying to find places for people to process. So what we also did really quickly was we worked to expand our capacity. We introduced a fast track equal to inspection program and offered a lot of the custom plants. So they want to move to equal to, something like that. We also tried to assist our very small plants in moving into inspected slaughter more quickly, and so that they could have a bigger market for their products. And then, of course, work with plants who are interested in license and expanding. Next slide. And we can continue to do something else new in COVID. I think that really helped was we really expanded our webinars. I know I see many of you on here that have participated in our webinars. We had an equal to webinar. I think that had over 100 and some people on it. We did a poultry webinar and a poultry processing webinar listening session. We know poultry processing at the smaller scale is a huge issue. We also collaborated on ABCs of small meat processing. Next slide. So some of the grants and cost shares that we were able to get and do at the department was we first created a rapid response grant with CARES dollars, or within Agri, which is our main grant account we have at the department. And we awarded 81 grants to custom and equal to plants, and also to farmers who direct market that totaled $360,000. Those grants, I think, were really successful. They were, I think, for $5,000. And we really, something we'll continue to look at as we get dollars more, but they really helped to buy saws, temporary storage, really helped alleviate some of those other things. We also worked through our accounts too to do $340,000 to 7 businesses that were some of our creameries and things like that, and some of our bigger plants to purchase PPE for employees and things like that. And then we fast-tracked 11 big value-added grants to help meat and poultry processing on a equal to custom and USDA smaller level at $160,000. And so that's a big piece, as well as providing the matching service for hog farmers seeking alternative processing. So that again, and we also have a legislative initiative this year to go for $1 million more to be added into our Agri account. And so appreciate any help. You can talk to your legislator, tell them that we need dollars for our to help build out our meat processing. And so that is a big ask we have, is $1 million to put into some of these programs. Next slide. And then I already mentioned this, we created the fast track program and an equal to get help our processors get inspected quicker. We reduced the time that needed to get a meat plant under our equal to inspection from several months to weeks. It was just amazing as I get my update every week to see plants that are coming online. In fact, just this last week, I think we had several new plants coming as well. We also have a caseworker assigned to help them, and answer their questions as they're coming online. Next slide. So some of the results, just to show you some of the numbers, we added 4 equal to slaughter establishments. That's an increase of about 20% in plant numbers this past year. These plants continue to successfully operate in the equal to program. We also have existing plants that increase capacity early on. Some plants dropped out due to market changes, and that's really interesting too, and tough as restaurants open and close, and impact on that is really something that, as an administration, I try to relate as we're opening and closing and turning the dial, is very difficult. Custom exempt plants is where we've seen the most growth, with a total increase of 16 plants. And so we now have 227 plants, or 243 plants as of December 1st. And I think that's even gone up more in these last 2 months since then. Mostly new builds on those 16. And we did lose, I think, 2 or 3 to fire and retirement. We really try to get those retirements and really try to get the new people in those. Tremendous opportunity right now. Next slide. Kind of the current status, we have regional supervisors continue to visit those prospective plants that are looking at new builds and remodels, kind of how it works too. I'm excited. We have a great person on our staff, Levi Mull, who does a lot of great work. I feel like people call me and they say, I want to build a USDA plan, or I want to start a custom plan. I send them to Levi, and it's amazing. And Dr. Neeser, how quickly and things they can work with them and start getting them up and going. Custom exempt continues to be the biggest area of growth. It's easy to get with the customer needs right now, and we continue to see some opportunities there. Man, unfortunately, many processors continue to report being fully booked well into 21 and 22. And that's why I think we're making this a top priority and seeing how we can work through this. So we're currently actively working with 3 new E2 slaughter establishments, 4 new E2 processing, and 3 new custom exempt slaughter establishments. Next slide. Small processors report difficulties finding employees is another huge problem. I just want to mention that we're working on that with Central Lakes College and Ridgewater. Labor shortages, very difficult. We'll just leave it at that. Next slide. I know we're running short. I just want to highlight too at the end here, we have an emerging farmers working group that we're very excited about, that we are trying to see everything that we're doing. We held 6 listening sessions in 2019. The legislature approved creation of a working group. Next slide. And this is to advise the commissioner on all our programs and everything that we can do to do a better job and to do more outreach. And I'm very excited. We had a meeting yesterday. I had great ideas just listening to the committee and things, the ideas that they have. And I think this is going to be a huge opportunity. Next slide, please. Here's some of the members that are on our working group. There's a few of the people that are here on this. And, some of the things, we're continuing to look at too is our meat processing, access to land capital, our programs within the department. There's a tremendous interest and resource of trying to get some halal processing going on a bigger scale in Minnesota. There's things happening there, but it just takes some time. Next slide. We're almost done here. Might be done. And that's just the end of it. You can go to the next slide. So they'll be working with that. I just wanted to finish up with some of our grants real quick. Let's see, next slide. There we go. I just want to finish by saying on these 2 slides, to check out, if you do nothing else today, or if you're not familiar, go to our department or just Google Minnesota Department of Agriculture Loans and Grants. You'll get the list of all the grants we have. These are some of the ones I thought might be the most interesting. We want to be, we want them to get out. And I would mention on the USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant that we have almost 1.5 million. That's open right now. And we got a big boost from the USDA on that. It's a tremendous opportunity. And so check that out. It's our organizations, different things like that. And then next slide. And then always look, not that a farmer needs another loan, but we also have our Rural Finance Authority that does make loans to farmers. We have a micro loan, we have the COVID loan, we have livestock loans. Our interest rates have dropped from 4% to 2%. And on that COVID loan, it's a 0% on our share. We work with your local bank and that works like that. So I think that's it, Teresa. If you go to the next slide, and then I think that was it. Sorry, I talked too long, but I wanted to get through everything.
No, just fine. I'll just read one of the questions. Will the funding help small hog farmers? And I assume she means for the meat processors. We only raise 15 hogs a year, but we're unable to make appointments at our regular processor. We ended up driving 2+ hours multiple times to get our hogs processed in a timely manner. As a result, we are not raising hogs in 2021 because the processors are already booked for fall. She says, what are you going to do to help us? And I think you've answered some of that, but.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I think that's because I know like on farms that, the transportation is an important part of the cost, and so one of the things we're looking at too is we're trying to look at when we expand or where we're locating and trying to work with where are the needs. So it's helpful for me to hear what part of the states you're in that you're seeing, where we're trying to look at. We know, because we're, like I said, we're bringing many online, but I'm kind of interested too to make sure we're getting all around the state and getting those really hot points for where we're traveling. Where I live here in Pine City, it's an issue, and we need to build some processing. So that's a big piece as well. So yes, that's a top priority for us, and that's who we're trying to serve as exactly this questioner.
Another question, will the department work on accessing bonding for replacing some of the out-of-date slaughter processing?
Bonding's difficult because it has to have like a public use, different things. And so it's something we've looked at. We have done some bonding at processors that are smaller, such as NERC up on the Iron Range, the prison up there. They are just got a big bonding request, and they were able to be able to mobile slaughter more. The University of Minnesota Meat Lab also has gotten some, as well as the Main Street Project is able to open a chicken processing in Albert Lee, or will be working on that. They got $250,000 in the last bonding bill. So Jim, that's something that we've been looking at and trying to figure out how the best way to do that is. And that's a great point.
Another question, can you elaborate on the education for meat processors? Pardon me.
Yes, and we've been working with Farmers Union's been really helping lead this at the Central Lakes College, and Staples is putting together a plan that would help train people to go into working at meat shops or butchering and things like that. And then Bridgewater College in Wilmer is also looking at adding classes and everything too, and courses. And so that's exciting. One of the things too, and I see this question too, is mobile slaughter. We're looking at trying to see if we can do something with those colleges too on a mobile slaughters. And we have been trying to fund some of those too as well with our grants, and realize, especially on chickens, that that's a top priority, but also on other parts. So like suggestions, and that's helpful for me to hear, but we are trying to address that too as well. So that is an exciting piece that's moving through. And then also the Department of Labor and Industry also has a training program too that we're trying to build that out on.
Well, and related, Dana Burtness says, we need a mobile slaughter unit in Southeast Minnesota and duck and turkey processing. Anything you'd want to add there?
No, I just agree. I think that's really, I think extremely important, and so, we have to look at where we're putting like the processing, because we're doing mobile processing, but I don't know, like in the Southeast, like we're trying to see, we might be putting a lot in central Minnesota. And so that's one piece too, where people are going to go where the need is. And then the duck and waterfowl processing, that's something that, we're working on. I'll just say the margins are super tight on that. And so it's like, as we talk to people who are interested in doing that more and trying to see, like, are there regulations or things we can do? One other thing I'd like to see on meat processing, the continuing resolution that passed Congress at the end of the year, there's a lot of money. Thom Petersen put in his last great thing that's going to send a lot of money to Minnesota also for meat processing. And we were also trying to work through some of our federal guidelines on that waterfowl processing too. So interesting question. Not my strong suit, but great question.
And this will be our last question for the day. I really thank participants for attending and greatly appreciate your presentation, Commissioner Petersen. The last question is, are you doing anything to bring in BIPOC individuals into meat processing ownership, Black, Indigenous, and people of color into meat processing ownership?
Great question, and I will just say that it's difficult, to just like a lot of different things, and that's why we have our working group. That's why we have, for the first time at the department, have a strategic plan that places emphasis on that. we're very excited, as I said, about some of the opportunities in the halal market, and especially looking at the goat sheep market, that there are going to be some ownership opportunities there. We do have ownership for Hmong on several ownership, have now owned several different entities too, which is really exciting. And then also our tribal governments are really getting involved. We, for the first time at the department, now have a tribal liaison who we work regularly with all 11 tribes in Minnesota. So I really appreciate that question and all the questions today. I'll put my name and phone number and email in the chat, and feel free to follow up with me anytime. I know many of you do. That's how I get my best information on all of this. So thanks for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you so much.